What was the sin sacrifice for the common people who sinned? This is the question that we seek to answer today as we continue our verse-by-verse study of the book of Leviticus on walking through the Bible. If you have a Bible with you, turn to Leviticus chapter 4. We're going to be reading from verses 27 to 35. If you don't have a Bible, don't worry. Just follow along with us on the screen. The version that we'll be reading from is the New King James Version. So, Leviticus chapter 4, beginning at verse 27. If any of the common people sins unintentionally by doing something against any of the commandments of the Lord in anything which ought not to be done and is guilty, or if his sin which he has committed comes to his knowledge, then he shall bring as his offering a kid of the goats, a female without blemish, for his sin which he has committed. And he shall lay his hand on the head of the sin offering, and kill the sin offering at the place of the burnt offering. Then the priest shall take some of its blood with his finger, put it on the horns of the altar of burnt offering, and pour all the remaining blood at the base of the altar. He shall remove all its fat, as fat is removed from the sacrifice of the peace offering, and the priest shall burn it on the altar for a sweet aroma to the Lord. So the priest shall make atonement for him, and it shall be forgiven him. If he brings a lamb as a sin offering, he shall bring a female without blemish. Then he shall lay his hand on the head of the sin offering, and kill it as a sin offering at the place where they killed the burnt offering. The priest shall take some of the blood of the sin offering with his finger, put it on the horns of the altar of burnt offering, and pour all the remaining blood at the base of the altar. He shall remove all its fat, as the fat of the lamb is removed from the sacrifice of the peace offering. Then the priest shall burn it on the altar according to the offerings made by fire to the Lord. So the priest shall make atonement for his sin that he has committed, and it shall be forgiven him. In the last 3 episodes, we have discussed the sin sacrifice that was to be offered when the priest sinned, when the whole congregation sinned, and when the ruler of the people sinned. In the first 2 cases, a young bull without blemish was to be taken and killed before the door of the tabernacle of meeting. The attending priest would then take some of the blood of the bull and go into the tabernacle and dip his finger in the blood and sprinkle it before the veil of the sanctuary 7 times. He would also place some of the blood on the horns of the altar of incense. The rest of the blood was to be poured out before the altar of burnt offering. As for the bull itself, all the internal fat portions were to be removed, just like in the peace offering, and burned on the altar. Whatever was left of the bull, including its dung, was to be taken outside the camp and burned. When it came to the ruler of the people and his sin sacrifices, it was slightly different. A young goat was required instead of a bull. The blood was only sprinkled on the horns of the altar of burnt offering before the rest was poured out at the base of that altar, and not sprinkled inside the tabernacle before the veil separating the holy place from the most holy place. And the animal was not going to be completely burned outside the camp. We'll find what happened to this animal, the Lord willing, in chapter 6. Now we come to the sin sacrifice of the one who Leviticus would refer to as the common people. These would be people who weren't priests, didn't represent the whole congregation, weren't the rulers of the people. Basically, these would be normal, everyday people, not in positions of authority. This sacrifice would be for sins committed against God's law by either committing what is not to be done or by not doing what is to be done. The sacrifice was to be offered when the sin became known to them. Again, like with verse 23 that we discussed in the last episode, verse 28 has a poor translation in the New King James Version and should read, "and when his sin is known to him." This would be in harmony with the rest of the chapter and be gracious by God. Otherwise, each person would be spending their entire time offering sacrifices just in case they didn't know of some sin they committed. The animal that they were to bring was slightly different to that of the ruler, for it would be a female goat without blemish, not a male. And just like with the other sacrifices, the one who brought the sacrifice was to kill it, which in this case meant that it would be on the north side of the altar of burnt offering, which is where the burnt sacrifice of the goats would be killed. The priest would then take some of the blood, dip his finger in it, and put it on the horns of the altar of burnt offering. The animal was then to be prepared the same way as of the ruler. The internal fat, like that of the peace offering, was to be removed and burned on the altar. Well, what happened to the rest of the animal, we'll find out, the Lord willing, in chapter 6. And like we've discussed before, if a person offered this sacrifice according to God's will, God promised forgiveness, which would be realized when Christ died on the cross. That's because the blood of a bull or a goat could not remit sins. Only the shed blood of Christ could do that. In verses 32 to 35, God made provisions for those of the common people to bring a female lamb without blemish instead of a female goat. He was being gracious here, as some may not have access to goats. The way it was prepared was exactly the same as the goat, following the procedures for the burnt offering and the peace offering. We'll continue with the sin offerings, the Lord willing, in the next chapter. With that, our time is up today, Lord willing. We hope you'll join us for tomorrow's discussion of Leviticus chapter 5, verses 1 to 6, as we continue our walk through the Bible, one verse at a time. Thank you for watching today's episode. We hope that you found it edifying and ask that you not only subscribe to our channel and podcast, but that you like and share this episode among your friends, so that the saving gospel of Jesus Christ can go out to the whole world.